The world of Elmara was dying, and most people did not even notice. It started slowly. The sunsets became shorter. The stars began to disappear, one by one, like candles blown out by an invisible breath. The flowers in the meadows stopped opening in the morning. The rivers, once bright and shining under the sky, turned gray and dull. It was as if someone was draining the light from the world, drop by drop, and no one could see where it was going. But Saren noticed. Saren was a young woman of 22 years who lived in the small village of Thornwall, at the very edge of the known lands. She was not a warrior. She was not a magician. She was a mapmaker. Every day, she sat at her wooden desk near the window and drew maps of places she had never been. She copied old maps, fixed broken ones, and sometimes, when she was feeling brave, she invented maps of places that might not even exist. Her hands were always stained with ink, and her brown hair was always messy, and she wore the same old green coat every single day because it had many pockets, and a mapmaker always needed pockets. Her father, Aldrich, had been a mapmaker too. He had been the best mapmaker in all of Thornwall, which was not saying much because Thornwall was a very small village. But Aldrich had a gift. He could look at the land and understand it. He could feel where the rivers wanted to go. He could sense where the mountains were hiding behind the clouds. People came from faraway towns just to buy his maps, because they were always perfect, always true. But Aldrich had disappeared 3 years ago. One morning he had packed a small bag, kissed Saren on the forehead, and told her he had to go somewhere important. He said he had found something on one of his old maps, something that worried him deeply. He said he would be back in 2 weeks. That was 3 years ago. He never came back. Saren had waited. She had cried. She had searched. She had asked every traveler who passed through Thornwall if they had seen a tall man with gray eyes and ink-stained fingers. No one had. After a year, most people in the village told her to accept the truth. Her father was gone. He was probably dead. She should move on with her life. But Saren could not move on. She kept his workshop exactly as he had left it. She kept his tools clean. She kept his old maps rolled up neatly on the shelf. And every night, before she went to sleep, she looked at the last map he had been working on before he left. It was an old, strange map that showed a part of Elmara she had never seen before. It showed a mountain range called the Teeth of Shadow, and beyond that mountain range there was a single word written in her father's handwriting: lantern. She did not know what it meant. One evening in late autumn, Saren was sitting in the village tavern, eating a bowl of soup and listening to the old men talk. They were always talking about the same things: the weather, the crops, the price of wool. But tonight, their conversation was different. "The dark is getting worse," said old Brennan, shaking his head. He was the oldest man in Thornwall, with a long white beard and only 3 teeth. "I have lived 81 years, and I have never seen nights this long. The sun barely shows its face anymore." "It is just a bad season," said Marta, the tavern owner, wiping a glass with a cloth. "It will pass." "It will not pass," said another voice. Everyone turned to look. A stranger was sitting in the corner of the tavern, wrapped in a dark blue cloak. No one had noticed him come in, which was strange because Thornwall was so small that everyone noticed everything. The stranger had a thin face, sharp eyes, and silver hair that fell past his shoulders. He looked old, but his voice was strong and clear. "Who are you?" asked Marta, narrowing her eyes. "My name is Calder," said the stranger. "I am a keeper of old stories, and I am telling you, this darkness will not pass. It will grow, it will spread, and if no one stops it, within 1 year, the sun will not rise at all. Elmara will be covered in shadow forever." The tavern went silent. Old Brennan put down his drink. Marta stopped wiping the glass. Saren stopped eating her soup. "That is nonsense," said Brennan, but his voice was shaking. "It is not nonsense," said Calder. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a very old book. The cover was made of dark leather, and the pages were yellow and cracked. He opened it carefully and turned it so everyone could see. On the page, there was a drawing of 5 lanterns, each one different, each one glowing with a brilliant light. Long ago, before any of us were born, the world was protected by 5 great lanterns. They were created by the first people of Elmara, the ones who lived here before anyone else. These lanterns held the light of the world inside them. They kept the balance between day and night, between light and shadow. But the lanterns were hidden. They were placed in 5 secret locations across Elmara, and guardians were chosen to watch over them. "What happened to them?" Saren asked. She did not know why, but her heart was beating fast. Calder looked at her. His sharp eyes seemed to study her face carefully. Over the centuries, the guardians died, and new ones were not chosen. The lanterns were forgotten. And now, something is happening. Something is feeding on their light. One by one, the lanterns are going dark. 3 have already gone out. Only 2 remain. And when the last one dies, the world will fall into permanent night. "And what happens then?" Saren asked. "Then the shadow comes," said Calder, and for the first time, his voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "The shadow is an ancient thing. It lived before the light. It hates the light. It has been waiting, very patiently, for thousands of years, for the lanterns to fail. And when they do, it will rise and cover the world, and nothing will ever grow again. No sun, no stars, no fire, just cold, empty darkness." The tavern was completely silent now. No one moved. No one spoke. Then old Brennan laughed, a nervous, shaky laugh. "Stories," he said, "just old stories to scare children." But Saren was not laughing. She was thinking about her father. She was thinking about the word he had written on his last map. Lantern. After the others went back to their drinks and their conversations, Saren walked over to Calder's table and sat down across from him. "You know something about my father," she said. It was not a question. Calder looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded slowly. "Aldrich the mapmaker. Yes, I knew him. He came to me 3 years ago. He had found one of the old maps, a map that showed the location of the great lanterns. He understood what was happening to the world before anyone else did. He went looking for the lanterns." "Did he find them?" Saren asked, her voice tight. "He found the first one," said Calder. "But the journey to find the others was dangerous. I do not know what happened to him after that. I am sorry." Saren felt tears burning in her eyes, but she pushed them down. She was tired of crying. She had cried enough for 3 years. Now she wanted answers. "The 2 lanterns that still burn," she said. "Where are they?" Calder tilted his head. "Why do you want to know?" "Because my father went looking for them, and he did not come back. Because the world is going dark. Because someone has to do something, and nobody else in this tavern is going to do it." Calder smiled. It was a small, sad smile. "You sound exactly like your father." He reached into his cloak again and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the table to her. "This is a map. Your father made it before he left. He gave me a copy for safekeeping. It shows the path to the 4th lantern in the caves of Mirren, beyond the Teeth of Shadow. If you can reach it and relight it, the darkness will slow. It will give the world more time." Saren took the map. Her hands were trembling. She unfolded it carefully. It was her father's work. She could tell by the tiny perfect lines, the careful labels, the small drawings of trees and rivers in the margins. It was beautiful, and it broke her heart. "I will go," she said. "It will be the hardest thing you have ever done," said Calder. "I know," said Saren, "but I am a map maker. I know how to find my way." She left the tavern that night with the map in her pocket and a fire in her chest. She did not know what she would find out there in the dark lands beyond the mountains. She did not know if she would survive. But she knew one thing for certain. She was done waiting. It was time to follow the map her father had left behind and bring the light back to Elmara. The Last Lantern of Elmara, Part 2. Saren left Thornwall before the sun came up, though calling it a sunrise was generous these days. The sky simply went from black to a bruised gray, like an old wound that refused to heal. She carried a leather bag on her back with bread, dried meat, a water skin, a small knife, her father's compass, and 3 blank rolls of paper, because a mapmaker never traveled without something to draw on. The map Calder had given her was folded carefully inside her coat pocket, close to her heart. The road out of Thornwall was a narrow dirt path that wound through brown fields and past empty farmhouses. The crops had not been growing well. The chickens had stopped laying eggs. Even the dogs in the village seemed sad and tired, lying in the dust with their heads on their paws, too weak to bark. The darkness was taking everything, slowly and quietly, like a thief who steals one small thing each night, so that you do not notice until it is too late. Saren walked fast. She wanted to reach the Greywood Forest by midday. According to the map, the forest was the first landmark on the path to the teeth of Shadow Mountains. Beyond the forest, there was a wide river called the Vale, and beyond the river, the mountains rose like broken teeth against the gray sky. And somewhere inside those mountains were the caves of Mirren, where the 4th great lantern waited in the dark. She had been walking for about 3 hours when she heard footsteps behind her. They were quick and light, like someone running to catch up. Saren turned around, her hand going to the small knife at her belt. A boy was running toward her. He was young, maybe 16 or 17, with messy red hair and freckles all over his face. He was carrying an enormous bag that was clearly too heavy for him, and he was breathing hard. "Wait!" he called out. "Please, wait!" Saren stopped and watched him stumble up to her. He bent over, hands on his knees, gasping for air. "Who are you?" she asked. "My name is Finn," he said between breaths. "I was in the tavern last night. I heard everything, about the lanterns, about the darkness, about your father." He stood up straight and looked at her with bright green eyes full of determination. "I want to come with you." "No," said Saren immediately. "But I can help," said Finn. "I am strong. Well, I am getting stronger. And I know things about the Greywood. My uncle was a woodcutter. He told me stories about the forest." "Stories will not keep us alive," said Saren. "Maybe not, but being alone will not keep you alive either." Finn looked at her with a steady gaze that surprised her. For someone so young, his eyes were serious. "I know what it is like to lose someone. My mother died last winter. The cold took her. The healer said it was not natural. The cold came too early and stayed too long. It was the darkness, was it not? The same darkness that is killing everything." Saren looked at him for a long moment. She saw the pain in his face, the same pain she carried inside herself every day. She did not want a companion. She was used to being alone. But she also knew that the road ahead was long and dangerous, and Calder had warned her that the closer she got to the mountains, the worse things would become. "Can you keep up?" she asked. Finn grinned. "I can try." And so they walked together. The Greywood Forest was not like other forests. It had once been a beautiful place, full of tall oak trees with green leaves, and singing birds, and streams that sparkled in the sunlight. Saren's father had told her about it when she was a child. He had walked through it many times, and had always said it was the most peaceful place in all of Elmara. But that was before the darkness. Now the Greywood was gray and silent. The trees still stood, but their leaves were gone. The bark had turned a sickly white, like bones left in the sun. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. The streams were still there, but the water was dark and thick, like ink. The air smelled wrong, not rotten exactly, but empty, as if the forest had forgotten how to smell like a forest. "This is wrong," whispered Finn, as they walked between the dead trees. "My uncle said the Greywood was full of life. He said there were deer and foxes and rabbits everywhere. He said the trees were so tall you could not see the top." "The darkness has been here," said Saren quietly. She pulled out the map and studied it. "We need to follow the old trail through the center of the forest. It should take us to the river by nightfall." They walked deeper into the Greywood. The silence was heavy, pressing down on them like a weight. Their footsteps on the dead leaves were the only sound. Saren found herself holding her breath without meaning to, as if she was afraid to disturb something. Then Finn grabbed her arm. "Did you see that?" he whispered. "See what?" "Something moved. Over there, between the trees." Saren looked. At first she saw nothing but gray trunks and dead branches. Then she noticed it, a shape, darker than the shadows around it, sliding slowly between the trees. It had no clear form. It was like a piece of the darkness itself had come alive and was moving on its own, flowing across the ground like smoke. "Do not move," said Saren. Her heart was pounding. The shadow shape drifted closer. As it moved, the air around it grew colder. Saren could see her breath forming white clouds in front of her face. The cold was sharp and painful, like needles pressing into her skin. Beside her, Finn was shivering. Then the shape stopped. It was about 20 steps away from them. For a terrible moment, Saren felt like it was looking at them, even though it had no eyes. She felt its attention on her, like a hand pressing against her chest. Then it moved on. Slowly, silently, it slid away into the deeper parts of the forest and disappeared. Saren let out a long breath. Finn was shaking. "What was that?" he asked. "I think it was a piece of the shadow," said Saren. "The thing Calder talked about. The ancient darkness. It is already spreading." They did not stop to rest in the Greywood. They walked faster, following the trail on the map, stepping over fallen branches, and ducking under dead trees that leaned across the path. Saren kept looking over her shoulder, expecting to see more shadow shapes behind them, but the forest was empty and still. By late afternoon, they reached the edge of the forest. The trees thinned out, and ahead of them was a wide, flat plain, covered in dry grass. And beyond the plain, Saren could see it, the river Vale. It stretched across the land like a silver ribbon, wider than she had expected. On the far side, barely visible in the gray light, the teeth of Shadow Mountains rose into the sky. "There it is," said Saren. "The river. We need to cross it." "How?" asked Finn. "I do not see a bridge." Saren checked the map. Her father had drawn a small symbol near the river, a boat. Next to it, he had written a name, Old Marin. "There is someone who can help us cross," she said. "A woman named Old Marin. She lives by the river." They walked across the plain toward the river. As they got closer, Saren noticed a small stone house sitting near the water's edge. Smoke was rising from its chimney, which was surprising because Saren had not seen smoke from a fire in weeks. In most places, fires were becoming harder to light. The darkness seemed to eat the flames. Saren knocked on the door. It opened slowly, and a woman looked out. She was old, very old, with deep wrinkles carved into her dark skin, and white hair pulled back in a tight braid. Her eyes were milky and pale, and Saren realized with a shock that the woman was blind. But those blind eyes seemed to look right through her, as if they could see things that normal eyes could not. "Aldrich's daughter," said Old Marin. It was not a question. Saren felt a chill run through her body. "You know who I am? I knew your father. I know his blood. Come inside, both of you. The plain is not safe after dark, and dark comes quickly now. They stepped inside the small house. It was warm, warmer than anywhere Saren had been in months. A fire burned in the stone fireplace, bright and strong, and Saren stared at it in amazement. The flames were not orange or yellow. They were white, pure, clean, brilliant white, like starlight trapped in a fireplace. "How is your fire still burning?" asked Finn, holding his hands toward the warmth. "It is not an ordinary fire," said old Maren. She sat down in a wooden chair by the fireplace and gestured for them to sit on the floor. "It is lit with a piece of lantern light. A small piece, just a spark, that I have kept safe for many years." Saren's breath caught. "Lantern light? From one of the great lanterns?" "Yes, your father brought it to me. He found the first lantern, as you may know. It was already dying, but he took a spark from it before it went dark completely. He gave it to me for safekeeping. He said someone might need it one day." Old Maren's blind eyes turned toward Saren. "I think that someone is you." Saren sat in silence for a moment, overwhelmed. Her father had been here. He had sat in this very room. He had planned ahead, even when everything was falling apart. He had left pieces of hope along the path, like breadcrumbs for her to follow. "He was a good man," said old Maren softly, as if reading her thoughts. "And a brave one. But bravery alone is not enough for the road ahead. The caves of Mirren are deep and full of traps. The shadow knows someone is coming. It will try to stop you." "How?" asked Saren. "It will use fear. It will use cold. It will use your own memories against you. The shadow cannot touch you directly. Not yet. Not while the last 2 lanterns still burn. But it can get inside your mind. It can show you things that are not real. It can make you forget why you are fighting." Old Maren reached into a box beside her chair and pulled out a small glass bottle. Inside the bottle was a tiny flame, no bigger than a fingertip, burning with the same white light as the fire. She held it out to Saren. "Take this, the spark of lantern light. It will not last forever, but it will protect you in the darkest places. When the shadow tries to blind you, hold this up. It will show you the truth." Saren took the bottle carefully. It was warm in her hands, and the tiny flame flickered gently, like a heartbeat. She felt something change inside her, a small spark of courage, a small flame of hope. "Thank you," she said. "Do not thank me yet," said old Maren. "Thank me when you come back alive." In the morning, old Maren took them to the river. She had a small wooden boat, hidden among the reeds. The water was cold and dark, but old Maren pushed them off with a long pole, and the boat glided across smoothly. On the other side, the mountains waited. Saren stepped off the boat and looked up at the teeth of shadow. They were enormous, jagged, and black, like the jaw of some great beast frozen in stone. The wind coming down from the peaks was bitterly cold, and she could feel the darkness pressing against her, thick and heavy. She touched the glass bottle in her pocket. The tiny flame pulsed with warmth. "Ready?" she asked Finn. He looked up at the mountains. His face was pale and scared, but he nodded. "Ready," he said. The Last Lantern of Elmara, Part 3. The teeth of shadow were worse than anything Saren had imagined. The mountains were steep and cruel, with narrow paths that twisted along the edges of deep drops. The rock was black and slippery, and the wind blew constantly, a cold, howling wind that cut through their clothes and made their fingers numb. There was no snow on the mountains, which was strange. Instead, there was something else, a fine black dust that covered everything, sticking to their boots and their clothes and their skin. It tasted bitter when it got into their mouths, like ash from a dead fire. They had been climbing for 2 days. The path that Saren's father had drawn on the map was still visible, barely. A thin trail carved into the mountainside by someone long ago. In some places, the trail had crumbled away, and they had to crawl on their hands and knees along ledges no wider than a man's arm. In other places, the trail passed through tunnels cut into the rock. Dark tunnels, where the only sound was the dripping of water and the echo of their breathing. Finn was struggling. He was young and strong, but the mountains were testing him. His hands were bleeding from gripping the sharp rocks. His legs were shaking from exhaustion, but he did not complain, not once, and Saren respected him for that. She knew he was scared. She was scared too, but fear was something they carried together, like a third companion walking silently between them. On the second night, they found a small cave to sleep in. It was not much, just a hollow in the rock, barely big enough for both of them, but it was sheltered from the wind, and that was enough. Saren pulled out the glass bottle with the lantern spark and set it on a rock between them. The tiny white flame filled the cave with a soft, warm glow. And for a moment, the darkness pulled back. "Tell me about your father," said Finn. He was sitting with his knees pulled up to his chest, his red hair dusty and wild. What kind of man was he? Saren thought about it. He was quiet, she said. He did not talk much. But when he did talk, people listened, because everything he said meant something. He never wasted words. She smiled at the memory. He used to wake up before dawn every morning and sit at his desk with a cup of tea, just staring at his maps. He said that maps talked to him. He said if you looked at them long enough, they would show you things that were not drawn on the paper. "That sounds a bit mad," said Finn with a small grin. Saren laughed quietly. Maybe it was. But he was always right. He could look at a map of a forest and tell you where the hidden streams were, even if no one had drawn them. He could look at a map of mountains and know where the safe passes were, just by the way the lines curved. Her smile faded. I think that is how he found the lanterns. He was not looking for them. He was just looking at old maps, and the maps told him. They were quiet for a while. The lantern spark flickered gently in its bottle. "Do you think he is still alive?" Finn asked carefully. "I do not know," said Saren, "but I hope so. I have to hope so, because if I stop hoping, I do not think I can keep walking." The next morning, they continued climbing. The path grew steeper and the air grew thinner. Saren's lungs burned with every breath. She had to stop frequently to check the map, because the trails up here were confusing. They split and merged and doubled back on themselves, as if the mountain itself was trying to lead them astray. By midday, they reached a wide ledge that looked out over the world below. From here, Saren could see the graywood forest, a gray smear far below them. Beyond it, the plains and farmlands of Elmara stretched to the horizon. But the sight made her heart sink. The darkness was everywhere. The land below was covered in a gray haze, and even at midday, the sky was the color of old iron. There was no blue anywhere. There was no green. Just gray and brown and black, stretching in every direction. "It is worse than I thought," she whispered. "We still have time," said Finn, but his voice was uncertain. Saren looked at the map again. According to her father's notes, the entrance to the caves of Mirren was near the top of the highest peak, behind a rock formation shaped like a hand. She scanned the mountains above them and saw it. 5 tall, thin rocks, standing together on a ridge. Their tops curved inward, like fingers reaching for the sky. "There," she said, pointing, "the hand of stone. The cave entrance is right behind it." They climbed for another 3 hours. The path became almost impossible. At one point, they had to cross a gap in the rock by jumping, and Saren nearly fell. Finn caught her arm at the last second, pulling her to safety, and they both lay on the cold rock, breathing hard, their hearts pounding. "Thank you," said Saren. "That is what companions are for," said Finn, managing a weak smile. Finally, as the gray light of afternoon was fading into the darker gray of evening, they reached the hand of stone. The 5 rock pillars were enormous up close, each one taller than 10 men standing on each other's shoulders. They stood in a circle, and between them was a low, dark opening in the mountainside, the entrance to the caves of Mirren. Cold air flowed out of the opening, and with it came a smell that Saren did not recognize. It was old and deep, like the smell of earth that has not seen light in 1,000 years. The darkness inside the cave was absolute. Not the gray darkness of the world outside, but a true, complete blackness, the kind of darkness that felt alive. Saren pulled out the glass bottle. The lantern spark burned brighter, as if it sensed the darkness ahead and was preparing itself. "Stay close to me," she told Finn. They entered the cave. The tunnel was narrow at first, barely wide enough for them to walk side by side. The walls were smooth, carved by water over thousands of years, and they were cold to the touch. The lantern spark lit the way, casting white light that danced on the wet stone. Their footsteps echoed strangely, bouncing off the walls and coming back to them changed, distorted, as if the cave was whispering their steps back to them in a language they could not understand. After about an hour of walking, the tunnel opened up into a vast underground chamber. Saren held up the glass bottle, and the light spread outward, revealing a space so large she could not see the ceiling or the far walls. The floor was covered in a thin layer of black water that reflected the light like a dark mirror. Strange formations hung from above, not ordinary cave formations, but shapes that looked almost intentional, almost designed. They looked like frozen waterfalls, like curtains of stone, like the pillars of some ancient underground temple. "This is incredible," breathed Finn. But Saren was not looking at the cave formations. She was looking at the far end of the chamber, where something was glowing, faintly, so faintly it was almost invisible, but definitely there. A small warm light, barely more than a spark, sitting on a stone pedestal in the middle of the water. "The lamp," she whispered. She started walking toward it, her feet splashing in the shallow water. The sound echoed endlessly in the vast chamber. The light grew slightly brighter as she approached, and she could see the lantern now. It was beautiful. It was made of some kind of metal she had never seen before, dark and smooth, with patterns carved into its surface that seemed to move and shift when she looked at them. Inside the lantern, a tiny flame was burning, barely alive, struggling to stay lit, like a candle in a storm. She was about 30 steps away from it when the temperature dropped. It was sudden and brutal. One moment the air was cold but bearable. The next moment it was freezing, so cold that Saren's breath turned to ice crystals in front of her face. The black water at her feet began to freeze, crackling and spreading outward in patterns that looked like dark veins. Then she heard it, a voice. Not a real voice. It did not come through her ears. It came from inside her head, from somewhere deep inside her mind, and it was cold and smooth and ancient. "You are too late. The light is already dying. You cannot save it. You cannot save anything." The shadow was here. Saren froze. The cold was unbearable, pressing against her from every direction, squeezing the warmth out of her body. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the glass bottle. The lantern spark inside it flickered wildly, its light shrinking. "Do not listen to it," shouted Finn from behind her. His voice sounded far away, as if the darkness between them was swallowing the sound. "Saren, do not listen." But the voice continued. "Your father came here. He tried to do what you are doing now. He failed. He is gone. You will fail too. You are just a mapmaker. You are nothing." And then the shadow showed her something. It was not real. She knew it was not real. She told herself it was not real. But it felt real. She saw her father, standing alone in a dark cave, calling her name, reaching out for her. She saw the darkness close over him like water over a drowning man. She saw him disappear. "No," she whispered. Tears were freezing on her cheeks. "Give up," said the voice. "Put down the spark. Let the darkness in. It is easier. It does not hurt. There is peace in the dark." Saren closed her eyes. Her body was trembling. The cold was so deep it was in her bones, in her blood, in her thoughts. She could feel herself giving up, could feel the fight draining out of her like water from a cracked cup. Then she remembered something old Marin had said. "When the shadow tries to blind you, hold this up. It will show you the truth." With the last of her strength, Saren raised the glass bottle above her head and opened it. The lantern spark burst free. It exploded outward in a wave of white light so bright that Saren had to close her eyes. The light filled the entire chamber, flooding every corner, every crack, every shadow. The voice in her head screamed, a terrible high-pitched scream of pain and rage, and then it was gone. When Saren opened her eyes, the chamber was lit with a warm, gentle glow. The lantern spark had not disappeared. It was floating in the air above her, small but fierce, burning with a steady white flame. And ahead of her, on the stone pedestal, the fourth great lantern was burning brighter. Its flame had grown. It was no longer a dying spark. It was a real flame, strong and warm, filling the lantern with golden light. The spark from her bottle drifted forward and merged with the lantern's flame. The light grew even brighter, and Saren felt warmth flood through her body, driving out the last of the cold. The black water at her feet turned clear. The stone walls of the chamber seemed to hum with a deep, ancient vibration, like the mountain itself was waking up. Saren stood before the fourth great lantern, its light warm on her face, and she laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because she was alive, and the light was burning, and the shadow had not won. Finn came splashing up beside her, his eyes wide with wonder. "You did it," he said. "Saren, you actually did it." "The spark relit the lantern," she said, still staring at the flame. "My father kept it alive. He kept it alive for me." They stood together in the warm light, two small figures in a vast underground chamber, watching the flame burn. For the first time in a long time, Saren felt something she had almost forgotten how to feel. She felt hope. But even as the hope warmed her heart, she knew this was not the end. The fourth lantern was burning again, yes, but Calder had said there were 5 great lanterns, and 3 had gone dark. Relighting one would slow the shadow, but it would not stop it. To truly save Elmara, she needed to find the others. She needed to find all of them. And somewhere out there, in the darkness beyond the mountains, her father was waiting. The Last Lantern of Elmara, Part 4. When Saren and Finn came down from the mountains, the world looked different. Not better, not yet, but different. The sky, which had been iron gray for weeks, now had a faint golden line along the horizon, like the memory of a sunset trying to come back to life. The wind was still cold, but it did not bite as deeply. And here and there, in the dead grass of the plains, Saren thought she could see tiny flickers of green, small, brave shoots pushing up through the brown earth, reaching toward a sun that was not quite there yet. The fourth lantern was working. Its light was pushing back against the shadow, just enough to give the world room to breathe. But it was not enough. Saren knew it was not enough. They returned to old Marin's house by the river. The blind woman was waiting for them on her doorstep, as if she had known the exact moment they would arrive. Again, not a question. "Yes," said Saren, "but I need to find the others, the ones that have gone dark. Where are they?" Old Marin led them inside, and sat by her white fire. She was quiet for a long time, her blind eyes staring at something far away that only she could see. "The first lantern was in the Tower of Ellen, on the Windmark coast," she said finally. "Your father found it 3 years ago. It was already dead when he arrived. He took the last spark from it, the one I gave you." She paused. "The second lantern was in the sunken temple, beneath Lake Corin. It died 2 years ago. No one was there when it went out. The third was in the Whispering Fields, far to the south. It died last winter. 3 dead lanterns, said Saren. 1 relit. And the 5th? Old Marin's face changed. Something passed across it. Not fear exactly, but something close to it. A deep uneasiness, like a person standing at the edge of a cliff. The 5th lantern is the oldest and the most powerful, she said. It is called the Heart Flame. It burns at the center of everything, in a place called the Hollow of the World. It is the deepest point in all of Elmara, far below the surface, in a place where no sunlight has ever reached. The Heart Flame is the original light. It was the first fire ever lit, the flame from which all other flames were born. If it goes out, nothing can bring it back. Not ever. Is it still burning? Saren asked. Barely, said Old Marin. I can feel it. It is like a heartbeat, growing weaker with every passing day. The shadow is focused on it now. It knows that if it can kill the heart flame, nothing else matters. The other lanterns, even the one you just relit, will all go dark without the heart flame to feed them. Saren felt the weight of this settle on her shoulders like a stone. Then I need to go there, to the Hollow of the World. I need to protect the heart flame. It is not that simple, said Old Marin. The Hollow of the World cannot be reached by ordinary paths. The entrance is hidden, and it moves. It is never in the same place twice. Only someone with the blood of the first people can find it. Saren stared at her. The first people? But they lived thousands of years ago. There is no one left with their blood. Old Marin smiled, a small and knowing smile. Your father never told you, did he? Aldrich was not just a mapmaker. He was a descendant of the first people. Their blood runs in his veins. Thin, yes, diluted over many generations, but still there. That is why the maps spoke to him. That is why he could see what others could not. And that blood runs in you too, Saren. The room was silent. Finn was looking at Saren with wide eyes. Saren felt dizzy. Her whole life, she had thought she was ordinary. A simple girl from a small village who was good at drawing maps. And now this old blind woman was telling her that she was connected to the ancient people who had created the great lanterns, who had held the light of the world in their hands. I do not feel special, she said quietly. Special people rarely do, said Old Marin. They stayed with Old Marin for 1 more night. In the morning, the old woman gave them food and fresh water, and she gave Saren something else, a small, smooth stone that fit perfectly in her palm. It was warm, and when Saren looked closely, she could see tiny veins of light running through it, pulsing softly. A waystone, said Old Marin. Hold it in your hand and think of the heart flame. It will guide you to the entrance of the hollow. But be warned, the entrance will only appear once. If you miss it, you will never find it again. Saren thanked her, and put the waystone in her pocket, next to her father's compass. She and Finn crossed the river, and began walking south, following the direction the waystone seemed to pull her. It was a strange feeling, like a gentle tug inside her chest, barely noticeable, but constant, like a compass needle pointing towards something she could not see. They walked for 3 days across the dying plains. The land was empty and quiet. They passed abandoned villages where doors hung open and dust covered everything. They passed dried-up wells and dead orchards where the fruit trees stood like skeletons with their arms raised to the sky. Once, they saw a group of people walking in the opposite direction, a family with young children carrying everything they owned on their backs. The father nodded at Saren as they passed, but did not speak. His eyes were hollow and tired. He looked like a man who had given up. On the 3rd night, they made camp in the ruins of an old stone building. It might have been a church once, or a school. The roof was gone, and they could see the sky above them, a flat, featureless gray without a single star. Finn built a small fire with the last of their dry wood. The flames were weak and orange, nothing like Old Marin's white fire, but they gave a little warmth. "Saren," said Finn, staring into the fire, "can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Are you scared?" Saren thought about lying. She thought about saying something brave and strong, something a hero in a story would say. But she was tired, and Finn deserved the truth. "Every moment of every day," she said, "I am scared that the heart flame will go out before I get there. I am scared that the shadow will stop us. I am scared that my father is dead, and that I am doing all of this for nothing." She paused. "But being scared is not the same as giving up. My father taught me that. He said fear is just a map of the things you care about. If you are afraid of losing something, it means that thing matters to you. And if it matters, it is worth fighting for." Finn nodded slowly. "Your father was a wise man. He was the wisest person I ever knew." They slept fitfully. Saren dreamed of fire, white fire, burning in a dark place, and a hand reaching out from the flames. She could not see whose hand it was, but she knew, somehow, that it was reaching for her. In the morning, the waystone in her pocket was burning hot. She pulled it out, and saw that the veins of light inside it were glowing fiercely, pulsing fast, like an excited heartbeat. "We are close," she said. They walked for 2 more hours, and then Saren stopped. In front of them, in the middle of a flat, empty plain, where there was absolutely nothing, no trees, no rocks, no buildings, there was a door. It stood by itself, a tall stone doorway, with no walls on either side, just a frame of carved stone, standing alone in the grass. Through the doorway, she could see the plain continuing on the other side, ordinary and empty. But the waystone was pulling her toward it so strongly, she could barely resist. "That is the entrance," she said. "It is just a door to nowhere," said Finn, confused. "No, it is a door to everywhere." Saren walked up to the stone doorway. Up close, she could see the carvings on the frame, intricate patterns of flames and stars and spirals that seemed to move when she looked at them from the corner of her eye. She placed her hand on the stone and felt it hum under her fingers, vibrating with an ancient energy. She closed her eyes and thought of the heart flame. The air inside the doorway changed. The view through it shifted, blurred, and then cleared, and instead of the empty plain on the other side, Saren saw a staircase, a long spiraling staircase made of dark stone, descending into the earth. Warm air rose from below, carrying with it that same ancient smell she had noticed in the caves of Mirren, the smell of earth and time and deep old fires. "The hollow of the world," she whispered. But before she could step through, Finn grabbed her arm. "Saren, look." She turned. Behind them, on the horizon, the sky was changing. The gray was deepening to black, and it was moving, rolling toward them like a wave, like a storm made of pure darkness. It was coming fast. And within the blackness, she could see shapes moving, hundreds of shadow shapes like the one they had seen in the Greywood, but bigger, much bigger, flowing across the land like a dark river. The shadow was coming for the heart flame. "Go," said Finn. "Go now, I will stay here." "What? No, you cannot fight that." "I am not going to fight it. I am going to slow it down. The door. Calder said the entrance only appears once. If I stay here and close it behind you, the shadow cannot follow you in." "Finn, if you close the door, I might not be able to get out." "Then you will find another way. You are a map maker. You always find another way." His green eyes were steady and calm, and Saren realized that the scared boy she had met on the road from Thornwall was gone. In his place stood someone brave and certain, someone who had decided what he was willing to give. "Finn, there is no time. Go." The darkness was getting closer. She could feel the cold already, the terrible bone-deep cold of the shadow. The shadow shapes were flowing across the plain, devouring everything in their path. The dead grass turned to black dust behind them. Saren looked at Finn one last time. She wanted to say something important, something meaningful, but there were no words big enough. So, she simply put her hand on his shoulder, held it there for a moment, and then turned and ran through the doorway. As soon as she crossed the threshold, she heard the stone door slam shut behind her. The sound echoed down the staircase like thunder. Then there was silence. Deep, complete, underground silence. She was alone. The staircase spiraled downward into the earth. The walls were carved with the same flame and star patterns as the doorway. The air was warm, and grew warmer with every step. Saren descended, one step at a time, her hand trailing along the wall, her heart heavy with worry for Finn, but her mind focused on what lay below. She was going to find the heart flame. She was going to save it. The Last Lantern of Elmara, Part 5. Saren descended for what felt like hours. The staircase spiraled deeper and deeper into the earth, and with every step, the air grew warmer, and the stone walls grew smoother. The carvings on the walls changed as she went down. The patterns became more complex, more beautiful, showing scenes she could barely understand. She saw figures made of light, creating mountains and rivers. She saw them planting seeds that grew into forests. She saw them building the great lanterns, 5 towers of flame, rising into a sky that was dark, before they filled it with stars. The first people, her ancestors. Saren touched the wall gently. The stone was warm under her fingers, almost alive. She felt a connection to these ancient people, a thin thread running through thousands of years of time, linking her to them. She understood now why the maps had always spoken to her, why she had always felt that the lines and shapes on paper were more than just drawings. The first people had made the world, and some small part of their power, their ability to see and shape and understand the land, had survived in her blood. The staircase ended at last. Saren stepped off the final stair and into a chamber that took her breath away. The hollow of the world was enormous. It was not a cave. It was more like the inside of a cathedral, but built by nature over millions of years. The ceiling was so high above her that she could barely see it, lost in warm, golden shadows. The walls curved inward like the inside of a giant egg, smooth and shimmering with veins of crystal that caught and reflected the light. The floor was flat and made of polished stone. And at the very center of the chamber, on a raised platform of pure white rock, stood the heart flame. It was the most beautiful thing Saren had ever seen. The heart flame was not like the other lanterns. It did not burn inside a metal casing or a glass container. It simply existed, a column of pure white fire rising from the stone platform, as tall as a person, as wide as an outstretched arm. It burned without fuel, without smoke, without sound. It just burned, steady and eternal. And the light it gave off was not just light. It was warmth. It was safety. It was the feeling of coming home after a long journey, the feeling of being held by someone who loves you, the feeling of waking up on a summer morning with the sun on your face. But the flame was dying. Saren could see it. The column of fire, which must have once been brilliant and strong, was thin and weak. It flickered and stuttered, shrinking and growing, fighting to stay alive. And around its base, creeping in from every direction, was darkness. Not ordinary darkness, but the thick, living darkness of the shadow. It moved like oil, slow and deliberate, inching closer to the flame, pressing against the light, trying to smother it. Saren ran toward the platform. As she got closer, the warmth of the heart flame washed over her, and she felt tears on her cheeks. Not tears of sadness, but tears of recognition. She had been looking for this her whole life, without knowing it. Every map she had ever drawn, every line she had ever traced, had been leading her here, to this place, to this flame. She climbed the steps of the white platform and stood before the heart flame. It was so close, she could have reached out and touched it. The fire did not burn like ordinary fire. It moved slowly, gracefully, like something alive and conscious. And as Saren stood before it, she felt it looking at her, acknowledging her, recognizing the ancient blood that ran in her veins. Then the shadow spoke. It was the same voice from the caves of Mirin, but stronger now, louder, filling the entire chamber. The walls trembled, the crystals in the stone rattled. "You have come far for nothing," the shadow said. "The heart flame is mine. It has always been mine. The light was stolen from the darkness, and I am simply taking it back." The darkness at the base of the flame surged forward. The heart flame shrank, and Saren felt the warmth pull away from her, replaced by that terrible, familiar cold. She could see the shadow now, not as shadow shapes or dark mist, but as a presence, a vast, ancient presence that filled the spaces between the light, that lived in every corner and crack, that had been waiting since before the world began. "The first people are gone," the shadow continued. "Their power is dust. Their lanterns are failing. And you are the last of their blood, a girl with ink on her fingers and fear in her heart. What can you do against me?" Saren's hands were shaking. The cold was pressing in, and the heart flame was shrinking. She could feel the weight of the shadow's words, and the worst part was that a part of her believed them. She was just a mapmaker. She was not a warrior or a magician. She had no weapon, no army, no great power. She had nothing. Nothing except a map. The thought came to her suddenly, clearly like a light turning on inside her mind. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her father's map. The one Calder had given her, the one that had led her to the caves of Mirin. She unfolded it with trembling hands, and she saw something she had not noticed before. In the corner of the map, almost invisible, written in her father's tiny, careful handwriting, were words. They were faded, almost gone, but Saren could read them because she knew her father's hand better than anyone in the world. The words said, "The flame does not need to be saved. It needs to be shared. Give it what it is missing. Give it the light that lives in you." Saren stared at the words. Give it the light that lives in you. What did that mean? She did not have any light. She was not a lantern. She was not magical. She was just a person. But then she thought about what old Marin had said, that the blood of the first people ran in her veins. She thought about how the maps had always spoken to her. She thought about the warmth she had felt when she first saw the heart flame, the feeling of recognition, of coming home. She thought about every step of her journey, the fear she had pushed through, the darkness she had walked into, the hope she had carried like a small flame inside her chest, even when everything was cold and black and hopeless. The light that lives in you. Maybe the light was not something magical. Maybe it was not some ancient power hidden in her blood. Maybe the light was the thing that had kept her going. The love for her father. The courage to keep walking. The refusal to give up, even when the voice in her head told her she was nothing. Maybe that was the light the heart flame needed. Saren put the map down. She stepped forward and placed both hands on the column of white fire. She expected it to burn. It did not. It was warm, almost unbearably warm, but not painful. She felt it flowing into her and through her, and she felt something flowing back out of her and into the flame. Everything she had. Every memory of her father. Every step of her journey. Every moment of fear she had overcome. Every small act of courage. The warmth she had felt when Finn decided to come with her. The strength she had found in the caves of Mirin. The love that had kept her moving when the world was falling into darkness. She gave it all to the flame. The heart flame exploded. Light burst outward in a wave so powerful it knocked Saren off her feet. It was not violent. It was joyful, like a laugh, like a shout of happiness after a long silence. The light filled the hollow of the world, flooding every corner, driving the shadow back with a force it could not resist. The darkness screamed, a sound that shook the earth, that rattled the mountains above, that echoed across the entire world of Elmara. And then it shattered. It broke apart like ice in spring, dissolving into nothing, driven away by a light so pure and powerful that it could not exist in the same space. The heart flame burned higher and brighter than it ever had. It was no longer a thin, flickering column. It was a tower of fire, a pillar of light that reached up through the stone, up through the earth, up through the mountains, and burst into the sky above Elmara like a sunrise that had been waiting for 1,000 years. Saren lay on the white platform, exhausted, empty, but alive. She looked up at the flame and smiled. She had nothing left to give. She had poured everything into the fire, and the fire had taken it and turned it into something magnificent. Then she heard a voice. Not the shadow's voice, a real voice, warm and familiar, coming from somewhere nearby. Saren, she sat up. A figure was walking toward her from the far side of the chamber. He was tall and thin, with gray eyes and ink-stained fingers, and he was smiling. "Father," she whispered. Aldrich knelt beside her and pulled her into his arms. He was real, solid, warm, alive. She could smell the ink and paper and old leather of his coat. She held on to him and cried, not caring that she was supposed to be brave, not caring about anything except the fact that he was here and he was alive. "I am sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I am so sorry I left you. I was trapped. The shadow caught me after I found the first lantern. It held me here, in the dark, to keep me from helping. But I left you everything I could. The map, the spark, the waystone. I left you a trail, because I knew you would follow it. I knew you would come." "You knew?" she said, pulling back to look at him. "You are my daughter," he said simply. "You are a map maker. You always find your way." They climbed the staircase together, father and daughter, hand in hand. When they reached the top, the stone doorway was still there, standing alone on the plain. But the plain had changed. The dead grass was green. The sky was blue. A deep, rich, beautiful blue that Saren had almost forgotten existed. And there, standing in the grass, with his messy red hair and his ridiculous grin, was Finn. "You took your time," he said. Saren laughed. She laughed so hard that she could not breathe. And Finn laughed too. And even Aldrich laughed. And the three of them stood in the sunshine on the green plain and laughed until their stomachs hurt. Because the shadow was gone. Because the heart flame was burning. Because the world was alive again. They walked home together. The journey that had been cold and dark and terrifying was now warm and bright and peaceful. The graywood forest was blooming. The trees had green leaves again, and birds were singing in the branches. The river Vale sparkled under the sun. Old Marin stood on her doorstep and waved to them as they passed, and her blind eyes were shining with tears. When they reached Thornwall, the whole village came out to meet them. Old Brennan was crying. Marta was laughing and pouring drinks for everyone. And Calder was there too, standing at the back of the crowd, smiling his small, sad smile, which was not sad anymore. Saren went back to her desk by the window. She spread out a fresh piece of paper and picked up her pen. But she did not draw a map of somewhere she had never been. Instead, she drew a map of everywhere she had been. The graywood forest, the river Vale, the teeth of shadow, the caves of Mirren, the hollow of the world. She drew every step of her journey, every path, every mountain, every cave. And at the center of the map, she drew a flame. She titled the map The Way Home. And outside her window, the sun was shining.